Have you ever seen a woman fight with all her strength, only to still lose everything? What happens to a widow who buries her husband, watches her farm wither, and cannot even promise her little girl a full meal tomorrow? How many nights can a mother hold her child close, hearing the question she cannot answer, Mama, when will Daddy come home? That was the life of Clara, a woman whose sorrow was carved deep into her soul. The wind in Montana was unlike anywhere else. It wasn't just air moving, it was a living creature growling and howling across the wide prairies, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and loneliness. For Clara at 28, that wind had been her only companion for the past 2 years. Ever since her husband Jack had died in a mining accident, the wind had sung its mournful song through the cracks of her old wooden cabin. Clara was not a weak woman. She was slender, with narrow shoulders and hands hardened by work, but her once strong spirit forged in youth was being worn down by harsh reality. For 2 years she had fought to keep the land Jack had left her. She plowed and sowed with her own hands, repaired fences, milked the lone cow that remained. She worked tirelessly from before sunrise until the stars lit the night sky, but her efforts were in vain. The crops failed, the soil dried. The winters devoured what little remained. Every evening as she sat by the fire, holding her 5-year-old daughter Lily, her heart broke a little more. Lily, with her golden hair and blue eyes as bright as a Montana sky on a clear summer day, was all she had left. But those blue eyes no longer sparkled. They held a quiet sadness, a longing for a life she had never known. She often asked Mama, when will Daddy come home? And each time Clara could only hug her tighter, too afraid to answer, for fear her voice would shatter. Her greatest pain wasn't her own struggle, it was her inability to shield her daughter from want and sorrow. Only one image colored their solitude. Thomas's ranch a few miles away sat high on a hill. From afar, his land thrived, cattle grazing wheat fields golden and strong. And Thomas himself was a giant of a man, broad-shouldered and weathered, the kind of man people respected and feared. Though rugged and stern in appearance, Clara often saw him bent low in his fields, working with careful, deliberate hands as though tending to art. She knew he had lost his wife just weeks ago to childbirth complications, and though he was only a distant figure in her world, she felt a kinship in grief. To Clara, Thomas was a far-off presence, someone she never imagined would enter her life. She only knew him as the silent, solitary giant. She did not yet know that behind his rugged frame was a shattered heart and a desperation even deeper than hers. Then one day everything changed. Winter came crashing early. The first snowstorm swept through the valley, felling trees, cutting off roads. In his desperation, Thomas went door to door in town, searching for a woman who could nurse his newborn. Every door was closed. No one could leave their family in such a brutal season. For all his strength, the man who could tame wild horses and build barns with his bare hands, Thomas was helpless before the hunger of an infant. His son would not take a bottle, and each day the child grew weaker. That afternoon, Thomas rode through the storm to Clara's farm. His looming frame at the door startled her. Little Lily clung to her skirts, peeking with wide, frightened eyes. Thomas dismounted, cradling the tiny, frail body of his son, Leo. The child's face was pale, his eyes closed, his breath shallow. Thomas met Clara's gaze. His words were not romantic, not dressed in poetry. They were raw, blunt words of survival. "I know what you are facing because I face it too," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "Your daughter needs a father, a home. My son is dying for want of a mother's milk." His voice broke with desperation. "I ask you to marry me. Not for love, not yet, but for survival. Come to my ranch, be my wife. Your daughter will have a father, a warm roof, food. My son will live. Together we can build a family, not out of choice, but out of necessity. Will you accept?" Clara froze. She had never imagined a proposal like this. It was no fairy tale, no gentle promise. It was a pact for survival. His desperation met hers. Could she gamble her life and her daughters on this man? The storm howled. The offer hung heavy like a dark, low cloud. Clara's pride urged her to refuse. She had fought to prove she could endure alone. But pride would not feed Lily, and in her daughter's eyes she saw the truth: hunger, longing, need. Thomas's words rang in her head, not for love, not yet. They were not the words of a man seeking to own her, but of a father fighting to save his son. She looked at the baby so frail in his arms and felt a mother's instinct stir inside her. "You don't need to answer now," Thomas said gently, placing a small sack on her doorstep. "There's food enough for you and Lily for a few days. Take it or leave it. I'll wait." Then he mounted his horse and rode back into the storm, leaving Clara trembling in the doorway. She did not move. She only watched his silhouette fade into the snow, her daughter tugging her skirts. "Mama, I'm cold," Lily whispered. Clara's resolve cracked. She looked at the sack, opened it, and found bread, smoked meat, and a flask of milk. Tears slid down her face. Not tears of weakness, but of gratitude. She had not accepted a proposal. She had accepted life. That night Clara did not sleep. She gazed at Lily's peaceful face and knew pride would not keep her child alive. She thought of little Leo fading in his father's arms. She knew her choice. At dawn she packed what little she owned, worn clothes, Lily's small toys. She left a farewell note for a neighbor. Then hand in hand with her daughter she set out toward Thomas's ranch. The snow had eased and the sun painted the prairie gold. Lily clung to her hand, skipping now and then as though this were an adventure. Clara felt something she had not felt in years: hope. When they arrived, Thomas was waiting. He did not speak. He only smiled, a quiet, weary smile, not of conquest but of relief. He lifted Lily gently. The little girl, shy at first, soon nestled against his shoulder, her small giggle ringing out. Clara's heart ached with joy. "Welcome to our home," Clara, Thomas said, voice low. "And welcome, Lily." Inside the cabin was simple but warm. Beside the fire stood a cradle where Leo lay weak and still. Lily rushed to peer inside. Clara followed, and when she saw the child, her heart clenched. He was so tiny, so fragile. She looked at Thomas, and in his eyes she saw his pain, the helplessness he had tried so hard to hide. "Would you like me to try?" she whispered. Thomas nodded, handing Leo to her with reverence. Clara held the baby close, guiding him gently. At first he was too weak to respond. Then slowly his eyes opened, and he latched. A soft sound filled the room, the sound of life. Clara wept silently. It was not love, not yet. It was something greater: survival, renewal. She looked up. Thomas's eyes glistened with gratitude, with respect. He did not speak, but in that moment a bond was forged stronger than any vow. Hours later, when Leo slept in the cradle, Thomas whispered, "Thank you, Clara." She shook her head, tears still shining. "You gave me and Lily a home." Thomas said nothing, but he knew the truth: she had saved his son, and perhaps saved him too. Days turned to weeks. Clara made the cabin a home. She mended clothes, cooked meals, and sang to the children. Lily's laughter filled the air again. Leo grew stronger, his cheeks pink and round. And Thomas, though still a man of few words, showed his heart through action. He chopped wood, repaired the roof, built shelves for Clara in the kitchen. Each act was a promise, unspoken but true. Lily called him Papa before the winter was over. Clara never dreamed of fairy tales anymore. She did not need them. She had something better: a man who respected her children, who needed her, and a home built not on illusions, but on compassion. One evening as the storm raged outside, Thomas sat by the fire. "Clara," he said, "I once thought I'd never find a partner again. Life was too harsh. I had lost too much." Clara nodded softly. "I thought Lily and I would be alone forever. But now," Thomas said, his voice breaking, "we have each other. Not because of some grand promise, but because we chose survival. And for that I am grateful." Clara smiled. She did not need a diamond ring. She did not need honeyed words. She needed this: his quiet vow, his presence, his strength. And as he wrapped her in his arms, not out of passion but of love and protection, Clara felt every scar on her soul begin to heal. Their story was not a fairy tale. It did not begin with once upon a time. It began with loss, with desperation, with a plea for survival. But it grew into something deeper: sacrifice, compassion, and true love. And they knew no matter how harsh the Montana winters they would endure, for they had each other, and that was enough. Sometimes the strongest beginnings come from the hardest places. Clara did not say yes to Thomas because of promises of romance or riches. She said yes because two children needed her and because her own daughter needed a home. What began as survival slowly became something deeper: respect, kindness, and love built one quiet day at a time. Clara's story reminds us that our worth is never measured by what others say about us, nor by the burdens we carry on our bodies or in our past. True worth is revealed in how we love, in how we endure, and in how we choose to keep showing up even when life feels impossible. Perhaps in your own life, you've known seasons like Clara's, when the world seemed to whisper that you weren't enough. But just as Thomas looked at Clara and saw not her scars but her strength, there are people who will one day see you for who you truly are. Sometimes that person might even be yourself. As you carry this story with you, may it remind you that love does not always arrive in the way we expect. Sometimes it begins with necessity, with shared burdens, and grows into something beautiful, something worth holding on to. If this story touched your heart, I'd love for you to subscribe to None. Wild West Saga, share it with someone who needs hope today, and leave a comment. Tell me, would you like to see what came next for Clara and Thomas, or hear another story like this one?